In this little vignette from the gospel, in which Jesus goes out into the wilderness for 40 days and is tempted by Satan, I think we see Jesus at his most human when we realize that, oh yeah, he really is just as human as the rest of us. Jesus has come to a realization which culminates in his baptism, that he does actually have spiritual powers, unusual, unique spiritual powers, and that God is calling him to use them in some way. And what he's struggling with now is, okay, well, how should I use these powers? And what does God want me to do with them? And like the rest of us, he is tempted to use what he has for his own gain, for his own selfish purposes. I think we have to understand that, for the temptations only work if it's something that you're actually attracted to in the first place, right? I'm never going to be tempted to go skydiving because the very thought of it just terrifies me. I'm never going to be tempted to eat, lima beans or candied yams because the thought of them sickens me. Espresso bean-filled chocolate bars? Absolutely. So it's pretty clear from the kind of temptations that Satan presents to Jesus is, Jesus is experiencing the sensation of, wow, I could do really powerful stuff with these powers that I have for my own gain, for my own purpose. And that's the very human dilemma that he faces. One of the things that struck me the most about reading and I've read this story so many times, but this time around, what struck me, I think, the most about it was Jesus' sense of isolation, that he is completely alone for 40 days without human contact. And he's in a weakened state because he's been fasting. And it's that, I think, that really leads him into this sense of the need to indulge his ego. And that's been, the reason I think that sense of isolation resonated with me is because that's been my experience the last 2 years, is being cut off, not completely cut off from all people. Thank God I have a spouse at home. But the sense of isolation, of losing contact with people that I really value, being in a community of people, different communities of people that I can share my life with. And that's been really hard. And I think one of the hardest things about it for me is that I end up thinking more about myself. What are my needs? How do I take care of myself? What can I do for myself? And I think, I wonder if that's what's happened to a lot of people in our society in the last 2 years. That as we've become more isolated from one another, we've become more focused on our own needs, our own selfish needs and our egos. And I wonder whether the sense that some people seem to have, many people seem to have, that, they're taking away my freedom. Where's my freedom? I want to be free to do whatever I want, is a result of that sense of isolation and focus on oneself. And I think the other thing that these last 2 years have really brought home to me is this really clear divide in human nature between, on the one hand, being very selfish. We're selfish selfish individuals. We're selfish creatures. We want to take care of our own needs. We think about them all the time. And yet, on the other hand, the fact that we are incredibly social creatures as well. We really care about what other people think about us. We really want to serve and have compassion for others. We want to engage with others. And, that's a kind of a constant experience of human nature, of experiencing that division. And I think one of the realizations that has really come home to me in the last 2 years is that I'm always trying to understand more about myself and about the world around me and about God. But more and more I've come to the realization the best way for me to do that is through interaction with other people. I can be off by myself and think about all kinds of things, but it doesn't often lead me to greater understanding, either of the world around me or even of myself. And I think that that's a paradox of how we learn, of how we gain understanding, is that we only can do it, the best way to do it is through engagement with other people. I mean, that's one of the things that that came home to me all the time when I was as an educator. Children learn, we all learn through interaction with others, and I think the tragedy of having students not be able to go to school was that it prevented them really from learning in the best way possible through social interaction. One of the things that kept me going through the pandemic, even through the worst part of the pandemic, was the fact that I continued to work as a volunteer at Meals on Wheels. I'd been doing that ever since I retired. And even when everything else was shut down and, we were completely stuck at home, I still went into the senior center once a week to help prepare and send out meals to the elderly people in need, because their need didn't go away. We had to do it. And it was through engagement, I think, with that community of volunteers, sharing our hopes and fears, sharing our understanding of what was going on and how we could make it through, supporting one another, encouraging one another. That was really a lifeline for me. And help me get through the worst of those times. Well, I think Jesus understands really well that the path to God is not a lonely path. It's not a path to pursue just by yourself. And if you think about his ministry, the way that he tries to carry out his ministry, it's by creating community and engaging people in social interaction with one another. There were, in Jesus' time, powerful prophets and wonder workers who would go around the countryside and gather crowds and harangue them and do miracles, and then they would move on someplace else. And but that's not really Jesus' style. What Jesus' style is to gather people around him in a place and engage them. The way that he teaches primarily is not by haranguing people, but by engaging them in dialogue and conversation, because this is how we gain understanding. His question and answer, the back and forth. And by inviting people to fellowship, all these meals that he has with broad communities of people, all kinds of different people, is really a way of saying, if you want to understand the nature of the divine, you have to come together with other people and share with them and be intimate with them and talk with them. And then you will come to understand what God is like and what God is calling you to do. And that's what I think for me, that's been one of the challenges of the last 2 years, is having a hard time being able to do that. It is, it's a tremendous, Zoom is great, and we're so fortunate to have it, and to be able to engage with people in that way. But my goodness, to be here with you all now is a real blessing. So Lent is traditionally a time when people undertake particular spiritual discipline. So I might decide for myself, I'm going to, do these prayers or do this reading or do this study for myself. And I think that's great. And that can lead to new insights. But I think for me, this Lent, what I most want to do is to take on the discipline of re-engaging with other people in ways that I haven't been able to do in the last 2 years, and hoping that this is a moment in the pandemic when I will be able to do that, when it will be more able to do that. So for me, what I want to commit to is, reaching out to people, and sometimes it's going to be on Zoom, but reaching out to people, trying to engage in different ways with other people, to engage them in dialogue and conversation, to share my understanding of the world with them, and have them share their understanding with me. Just to be present to people, because I think that's what I need. That's what I need to be able to gain and renew my spiritual awareness. So I wish you a holy and blessed Lent. I hope you're able to engage in whatever spiritual disciplines you think will prove helpful for you. But I hope we can also encourage one another to engage together, to be in community, to reach out to other people, to be present to people. Because I think that if we can do that, if the pandemic will permit us to do that, we will indeed have a holy and blessed Lent. Amen.